Hi Potters. Okay, so in this video I'm going to show you the technique of Sgraffito. So right here I have my hanging planter or hanging vessel, and it is pretty much bone dry. You can do the step bone dry or leather hard. You just don't want your pot to be very wet, otherwise when you're putting on the underglaze it won't absorb into the pot. So for this one, again, this is pretty, you can hear it, it's pretty dry. Hasn't been fired yet, pretty dry. The materials we're going to use is underglaze, which can be found in the underglaze cabinet. And there's a whole bunch of different colors. You can mix different colors so that you're not just using it right out of the jar, up to you. We're also going to use some mini ribbon tools. And this is what those look like, mini ribbon tools. And I really like to use a wooden skewer, okay? And I also brought over a needle tool because I don't want you to use a needle tool. So I want to point out, don't use this. I actually prefer, it just doesn't make very good lines when you're doing Sgraffito. I prefer the wooden skewer because it has, it's less of a sharp tip and it makes a better line when you're doing Sgraffito, okay? So in addition to that, I have a brush. These big fluffy brushes I think are awesome and the best because they hold a lot of material. But if they're all out, you could use I think these are like an inch and a half flat brush, okay? So once you have all your supplies ready to go, you're gonna take your underglaze. This is a huge, important tip. When you get your underglaze, you're gonna have to shake it up. But before you shake it up, make sure that the lid is on tight because somebody always forgets to put the lid on tight and somebody shakes it and there's underglaze all over. So please check the lid. And then you're gonna shake this up. I already shook it up before the video, but you're gonna do this about, I don't know, 20 or 30 times. So get it all mixed up and you're gonna open that container. Oh, I forgot to mention, I'm also using a banding wheel. This is what the banding wheels look like, okay? This part comes off of here. So when you pick it up from the bottom. It always happens that somebody picks it up from the top and this falls and makes a big sound. It only happens once because once you do it once, you won't do it again. So I have a banding wheel and this makes it so we can turn the pot really easily. You don't want to turn it here. There's this nice little finger grip here that you can consistently turn it. So, banding wheel, and I have my pot. Now, for these hanging vessels, I'm thinking, you know, the plant really should be the focus of the hanging vessel. And so, I'm thinking, you know, just simple, either blocks of color or just the same color everywhere. So for this one, I'm going to go for probably color everywhere. I've flipped this upside down. This is the bottom of my hanging pot because that's what people are going to see. So I'm going to get my material, get my underglaze, and I'm going to spin that banding wheel and brush on that underglaze. Now, if you just brush on one coat, it's going to be kind of transparent, a little streaky. In order to get a nice coverage on this, you would have to put on 4 coats. So I'm putting it on even. Sometimes you get little like lakes and rivers of material. I want to spread those out. Now, depending on how dry your pot is, this stuff, the underglaze will dry and adhere to your pot pretty quickly. So that is coat number 2. I'm going to give that a few minutes to dry before I put on my next 2 coats, and then I'll show you what Sgraffito looks like. All right, so I have now completed the 4 coats of underglaze on my hanging vessel, and I'm ready to start the Sgraffito process. You know, again, I'm keeping it simple. I'm actually just going to do a pattern around this rim. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with one of the mini ribbon tools. I don't know if you can see that. And Sgraffito is really just scraping through that level letter, or I'm sorry, that surface of underglaze. So I'm going to get a little closer here. So hopefully you can see what I'm doing. This tool's a little bent. And I'm just scraping away, and you get these nice, beautiful, crisp lines. Again, you know, I don't really get concerned about making it like totally straight lines, totally measured out, because if I wanted something that was absolutely perfect, I would go to Target and buy something that was mass produced. But I think there is a lot of beauty in a handmade object where you can tell that a human being touched it, made it. Okay, so I'm going to continue doing this. And then I will come back and show you what this looks like. You don't have to just use one thickness of line. You can get bigger ribbon tools and scratch off bigger lines, little lines. So I would encourage you with this first one at least to play around with what different types of marks you can make using Sgraffito. Okay, let's talk about as you are doing your Sgraffito, you're going to get these like little crumbs coming off. If your pot is dry enough, you can just blow them off like that. But if your pot is a little bit more damp, they're going to kind of stick to it. Don't mess with them. If they're sticking, don't mess with them, because once you're done, you will be able to take a dry paintbrush and just dust them off. If you try to you're gonna wanna try to wipe them off as you're going. If you do that, it will push them back into the pot, and you will not have such a clean line. So again, this pot is pretty dry, and so I'm able to just kind of blow them off. All right, so here's just my really simple Sgraffito design. Now, I will tell you, while I was doing this, I was working in my lap, so I scooted my chair back and just laid it in my lap, because at this state, it is approaching bone dry. Your pots are really fragile. There's not a lot of water left in them. There's absolutely no flexibility. At this point, you probably don't want to press it on the table because it could just crumble apart. Also, when you're carrying a pot that is bone dry, you want to always cradle it, okay? You don't ever want to pick it up, I can't even do it, but pick it up by the edge or just hold it with one hand. You always want to cradle it. Now, as I'm looking at this, I actually did a pretty good job not getting my underglaze everywhere, but there's a couple spots where I don't like the craftsmanship aspect of it, so I'm just going to kind of scratch that off is one option. Or you could take a damp sponge and rub that off. So again, your craftsmanship is really good. Now this technique is now your technique. You get to have it forever. So with future projects, if you want to incorporate Sgraffito, you're more than welcome to. What's really fun is we keep introducing new techniques for every project. And then second semester, you'll have all of these techniques that you can get really creative with your pots. So that's that. The last thing that you want to do is, hopefully you stamped it once you got it all refined in the way you wanted it, but I'm also going to ask that you sign it. And here, I don't want it to be really obvious. I'm going to use the wooden skewer, and I'm just going to sign it, this area, Kind of goes along with the design. And there's my signature. So you guys should have your stamp and your signature on your pots. Once it's at this point, it needs to be bisque fired. So that's the first firing that your pots go through. In class, I will show you where you put them on the cart in the back in order to get them bisque fired. Once they come out of the bisque, they will turn from clay to ceramic. So it totally changes, you know, from this earth into a ceramic pot. Once it's been fired that first time and becomes ceramic, it is like that forever. It's going to last the next 10,000 years. So at this point, at bone dry, you could essentially, you know, put water in this and it would go back into clay. But after that first firing, the bisque firing, it can no longer do that. Once it's bisqued, I will show you how to glaze them, and then we'll fire them one more time, and they'll be ready to have their hanging system attached. All right, potters, let's see what you come up with.